Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at BTB World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to what is going on in India. It has been quite some time since we've been talking about the kind of acts of intolerance and violence that are now increasingly rampant in India, thanks to the BJP-led government also and the Hindutva ideology that has seeped into the very fabric of Indian society. This is, of course, a huge problem for particularly the Muslims in India, but also other minorities who continue to be the victim of such oppression. And we have seen that in the past many months and years, these acts of violence have increased. And in a recent video that also went viral, we saw that a Muslim man was also publicly lynched by 5 other alleged suspects. And they say that that was because Mr. Adam Khan, who was the Muslim man that was lynched, was seen as robbing a jewelry store. There are conflicted reports coming in with regards to what exactly happened, but the video has gone viral, which is of course very upsetting for the larger public, and reports are saying that Mr. Adam Khan is now in a serious condition. However, such lynching unfortunately is not something new that we see within India, which has for decades seen such acts of intolerance and violence, especially towards Muslims and Muslim religion, and of course Muslim heritage sites as well. We have seen that in the past the holy sites of Muslims have also been targeted, and on the 6th of December it is the 30th anniversary of the demolition of Babri Masjid, which unfortunately was also something that was done at the hands of Hindu extremists. And because of this, we have seen that the kind of actions that have been taken against such incidents sort of reiterate these acts of violence, because nothing much has been done regarding anyone who has been involved within the Babri Masjid attack as well, so many others. And now of course any sort of heritage claim that belongs to the Muslims is now being called otherwise by Hindu extremists, including the Taj Mahal as well. And because of such reports coming in, we see that the kind of attitude that currently exists within India is something that is given a lot of boost and encouragement from the state as well, from the current government. And because of that, we see that no dissenting voice is being able to create the kind of influence that is needed both domestically and internationally also, perhaps, which seems to be the problem as well in terms of the consequence that just does not exist for any action taken within India. So that is going to be our focus in the first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to take a look in the neighborhood as well. It's going to focus on what has happened in Afghanistan, where at least 7 people have been killed in a blast attack. This was due to a roadside bomb that has killed 7 petroleum company employees that were aboard a bus in northern Afghanistan today. And we also understand that this is part of the increasing incidents of terrorism within Afghanistan as well, something of course that is very concerning to Pakistan, since of course the spike in terrorist incidents within Pakistan have also increased, and the threat keeps on emerging from the Afghanistan soil as well. So peace in Afghanistan is of course imperative to peace in Pakistan and the region as well, and so we're very, very concerned. We condemn the incident. We are of course very saddened by the loss of lives, and our hearts go out to the people who have been bereaved, but we also want to be able to see justice done, for this to be investigated, and for more actions to be taken to protect the citizens of Afghanistan as well as those residing outside of Afghanistan, to protect the citizens of Pakistan and the region from Afghanistan's soil being used against any other territory. So that is going to be the focus of our second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, I've been joined in the studio by senior analyst Farooq Batafi, and for our first segment we've also been joined by a guest online by Brigadier retired Mr. Rashid Wali Janjua, who's Director Research IPRI. Thank you very much, Brigadier Janjua, for joining us. And also Humayun Khan, who's a senior analyst, has joined us online. Thank you very much, Mr. Humayun, for being a part of the debate. Let me start with you, Brigadier Janjua Sahab. Considering, of course, that we have seen incidents such as that of the viral video of a man being lynched in the past as well. We have of course seen many incidents of intolerance and violence within India. It is of course at the end of the day a question about what needs to be done. But we can of course, and we do condemn such incidents and have been doing so for decades. But at the end of the day, in terms of our ability to be able to stand by these victims, to be able to sort of guarantee any protection. That is perhaps something that we haven't so far been able to do. We have, of course, increased the influence in the way that the international community will look at what is going on. Yet it doesn't seem to be enough, because at the end of the day, these are the streets of India where such crimes are being committed, and nothing much is coming out of them. Furthermore, we also know that many years pass before we see any sort of justice. It is the 30th anniversary of the Babri Masjid incident as well, and yet we stand nowhere in terms of any improvement in the lives of the Muslims and other minorities within India. What can be done about this immediately and in the long term?
We all know that India is in complete stranglehold of Hindutva particularism. And that particularism derives itself from a hate creed that has no logic. And unfortunately, that hate creed is now having a symbiotic relationship with the mercantilist interests of Indian politicians who have forged a linkage with the corporate elite, and one feeds off the another. So, this hate filled campaign, which is being sedulously nurtured, has the political backing, it has the political patronage, and we know that other than the normal advocacy uh, at international fora, this madness is not going to abate. So I think we need to ramp up our efforts to sensitize the world about these atrocities being committed and what a dangerous creed this Hindutva ideology is. And we all know that in Goa, one of the film festivals featured a movie that was called out by a Jew, Israeli, Mr. Lapid, who was a film critic. He was quite bold. He said that this is a vulgar movie, which is complete propaganda. And it is presenting half truths, and it's in a very poor taste. And that movie was Kashmir Files. So a complete narrative is being foisted upon majority population, which completely dehumanizes minorities. And in short term, I think we need to raise our voices at all international fora. And in the long term, I think the minorities themselves need to, wage a struggle from within India to, call out this epistemic barbarism.
Right, absolutely. And Mr. Mayuhan, considering all of this, and the fact that we have seen the Hindutva ideology spread out even more within the BJP-led regime, and because of the kind of support that exists, the kind of impunity that exists from within the state as well, this is a problem that is perhaps far deeper and needs to be resolved in a way that requires a lot of support from outside of India as well. Yet, of course, as we all know, the kind of political and economic interests that are there with regards to relationship with India are something that perhaps don't really allow for such action to be taken. But when we talk about the kind of human suffering that exists, the kind of violence that goes on in India, surely that must mean something in terms of the kind of international response that is required. Is it a matter of talking about it or raising it enough? Or is it the fact that even though that is done, it is not going to be a priority?
You're absolutely right, and agree with Brigadier Janjua what he was saying. If we just go back to what other religions teach about, there's a philanthropic approach towards life, and most of the religion preaches that, be it Islam, be it Sikhism, Judaism, or Hinduism. The problem arises, there is always a small segment in society which is extremist, which wants to do stupid things to like different people. But the problem arises when state institutions starts supporting them. And that's exactly what has happened in the case of India, that, there was like this zealot of RSS, Bajrang Dal, Shiv Sena, and then BJP started supporting all of them. And instead of being a secular India, which everybody used to like, it has become a Hindu, which is only for the Hindus there. And there's like 200 million plus Muslims. They're like Sikh, they're like Maoists, they're like Christians. All of them are suffering so much in India. And now the need arises, is it like just the voices from within or outside? I think, in my opinion, we need to start from asking international community to put its foot down. But again, yes, India is a bigger economy. There's a lot of economic interest there. But then there's also a Muslim community, which has always been sort of like a lackluster approach, beginning with OIC. We've never seen like a bigger concern shown by a collective voice of the Muslim Ummah. Then we also have seen in Kashmir what has happened. It was an unconstitutional step which they have taken, and it's been like 2 years. It has become one of the largest open air prison. There's a media blackout, there's internet blackout. Most of the youth has been put behind bar. There's so much atrocities going on, yet there's like little voice that we hear from international community and also from the Muslim Ummah. So I guess there's like a collective need of humanity to come out. Don't consider them Muslims in India, just consider them human beings. And by the way, we in Pakistan, we still believe that like they're very good people in India. There's like a secular India, which we always used to like. But of late, when Prime Minister Modi has taken over, particularly as the Prime Minister, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat as well, we have seen like a systematic approach where Muslims have been like demonized, all the minority has been demonized, and they are suffering. And I think world needs to put its foot down.
Absolutely. And Farooq Humayun talked about the remnants of secular India, and it perhaps is only present in some voices who are still talking about what is going on and who are really saying what it is like. But at the end of the day, they have to pay such huge costs to just raise their voice against injustice. And because of that, we see that there are less and less such people, or perhaps their influence is also weakened. And because there is no accountability, it seems that this can actually increase, and perhaps we can come to a point where we don't have such voices both within or outside of India as well. Pakistan, of course, will continue to do so, but at the end of the day, if for decades this is something that has continued, the violence and suffering of Kashmiris is there, the minorities is there within India, and we've only seen it get worse within the BJP regime. Where do you see the future of India?
Right, Sana, and before I talk about India's future, let me actually respond to one thing that Brigadier Janjua particularly said, were the importance of raising voice. My humble submission is that the concern here, especially in my lived experience, is not that we don't raise voice, but it is the frustration that no matter what you do, it is a force of history. Something uncanny is happening in India, and it cannot be stopped, right? So the entire world is silent. You and I cannot be the only ones who keep on actually fighting these lost causes. But when you were talking about secular people in India, I think they are the children of India that have been betrayed. They were raised on the false premises and promises, and eventually they actually lost the ground, and finally Indian government actually showed their actual face. So that has been going on. There are two ways to actually look at what is going on in India, Sana. One is, of course, that I used to call the BJP's shock and awe doctrine. I wrote a piece also back in 2019, February 23rd, and you can look it up. It tracks the history of BJP, how it kept on consolidating vote banks through all these shock and awe incidents. Every time, remember, Babri was demolished, but Babri was not the only thing that happened that day. They then unleashed a pogrom against Muslims in the region, and they killed somewhere around 1,000 to 2,000 people. Then in Gujarat also similar kind of things happened. Then later on as well, recently when Donald Trump was visiting Indian capital, at that time also a pogrom was unleashed against Muslims. So this keeps on happening. You can attribute everything to BJP, but then you can also look at what the nature of Indian government or state is. And what exactly is it? Go back to 1947. At that time, people like Sardar Patel, who is now actually, they have erected the highest, statue in his honor. He was actually, peddling soft Hindutva. Gandhiji, we eulogize him and deify him, but his ideology regarding religion was quite interesting, right? So the Indian state was this, and this was the whole concept that was going to unfold. So it is natural causation of history. I believe that when Pakistan was created, there was a choice given to Muslims, whether you go to a Muslim abode or then stay in India to rot. Those who chose to actually stay in India are rotting right now. So the whole thing at this moment is, I couldn't be bothered about what is happening right now within India, because India is doing to itself what was to come. I'm only concerned about Kashmiris. And when you talk about the overall situation, why does this happen? Why do they attack Muslims? They don't get any other benefit. The biggest problem is India's ruling elite, that is Brahmins, right? Brahmins are only 5% of their population. Who are the rest? Majority is the scheduled caste. So they have this fear that somehow, someday the majority will rise against the minority and start fighting. So in order to actually ensure that the caste-based system remains intact and together, they call it a Hindu consolidation. And for that, they need some other community to attack. So eventually you're going to see first they are attacking Muslims, then come Sikhs, then come Christians and other minorities, eventually Dalits as well. So this is what is going to happen, and I don't think the entire world cares a lot, so why should we worry too much?
But of course, it has its impact on not only Kashmiris, but also for people who are belonging within India, for people who are residing outside of India as well. There is going to be perhaps a spillover effect, which is perhaps already there. Shouldn't we not be worried about that?
Yeah, I'm concerned about Kashmir because Kashmir has never been part of India. It is Pakistani territory occupied by India. So I will keep on worrying about them. But honestly, I don't want to be defeatist. One lesson I got from Churchill, allegedly from Churchill, was if you are 20 and you are not a revolutionary, you have never been young. If you are 40 and you are still a revolutionary, you have learned nothing from life. So at this moment, I'm coming to terms with the fact that I cannot be a revolutionary.
All right. Brigadier Wali Saab, when we take a look at the situation, of course, there is what Farooq is saying, and that is part of the reality considering what we have seen over the years and how things have unfolded. But when we take a look at what is going on and the way that we have been dealing with it, or the way that it has been highlighted, and yet there is no response, what other tools or measures do we have at our disposal to look into? For example, the kind of viral video that we have seen over the recent lynching as well, and many others in the past, are they benefiting us in any way? Because of course there is a lot of impact of such content, especially that on social media, that is again also a tool that is being used to even motivate a lot of the factions of society who are already radicalized.
Yes, that's correct, because one act of violence begets another act of violence. But we need to be careful in, responding to such acts, because our own society also needs to be shielded from these pernicious influences. And we have to raise the moral aspect, because what is happening in India is not only persecution of minorities, but this is a complete negation of the very concept and ethos on which the Indian nationalism was based. It's no longer Nehruvian India or Gandhi's India. It is Nathuram Godse's India, where a kind of insidious, dangerous nationalism is taking over, and which not only is a threat to its own persecuted minorities, but the entire region, because this kind of violent uh, propensity can be externalized, because there are other elements which are non-state actors which can take it as a model and start destabilizing other areas and other places which are prone to such violence. So international community's response has to be carefully netted, and the way ahead is, I guess, some kind of a movement like boycott, divestment of Palestinians. I think we should start thinking of those novel and innovative ideas to call out this barbarism and particularism. And we need to sensitize the world, especially about the plight of minorities, not only inside India, but in Kashmir, like Patafi pointed out very correctly, that that's an area where a kind of a genocide, according to Gregory Stanton of Genocide Watch, is about to happen, because he had predicted the genocide in Rwanda, and it happened within years. He has predicted that for IIOJK, and according to him, the genocide has 10 rungs, and the eighth rung has already been reached, and what is left is perhaps exodus and extermination. 18 months of internet blackout, half widows, gerrymandering of electoral constituencies to disempower and disenfranchise the Kashmiris. These are all very, very clever, insidious, and well-planned attempts at erasing the identity of Kashmiris and slowly, exterminating the whole vestiges of their cultural, political, and economic identity. So this is a threat that not only is a threat to the region, to the areas that are affected by that, but the whole region, because look what's happening in the neighborhood. There's a Rohingya problem. There are other issues, and then the what's happening is that entire community is being marginalized and turned into aliens into their own country,
Right.
except, yeah.
Absolutely, and Brigadier Junjua, you point out important aspects regarding, of course, the way that this is happening, also within Kashmir. But Mr. Mayo, I want to understand that when we talk about especially issues of identity, issues of heritage, and the way that the demographics, the historical aspects of a society, that those are being changed, and the way, of course, this entire view of what is being looked at in terms of not just Muslim minorities but other castes within India as well, is diminishing the identities of these people. This is perhaps something that has been, because it has been going on for so long, it has already perhaps taken away certain aspects which we may not be able to recover. And because of that, it seems that we are on a clock, even though we have had so many decades pass by without any justice being given to the people of Kashmir, and so many generations have now witnessed what is going on in what you've called the open prison. But in terms of all of this, and in terms of the fact that time is also an important aspect in this, how can we urgently move forward in terms of being able to protect these identities? Because once lost, and once these identities have been done away with, the demographics have changed, or the way that we see the current existence happening change, then how will we go back from there?
I think it's like a very interesting question in terms of like Indian demographic, like what is happening with the Indian Muslim within India, short of Kashmir, because Kashmir has been declared a disputed territory, not by us, by United Nations. They're not only one resolution, they're like multiple resolutions. And there, when they're trying to use the demographic, that's a different ballgame and different story. And where Pakistan has been very on the forefront on all international forums, we have been criticizing that Article 370, 35A, the abrogation of their constitution and then making it part of the union territory, completely legal. Then there was also an act on Citizen Amendment Act based on the for the Bengali Muslim. That's also a separate thing. That's basically a populist BJP narrative where they want to show themselves that this is a country which is only for the Hindu people and no other minority needs to stay there. Their CM Yogi Adityanath, he's the CM of the UP, has been leading this effort on eradicating Muslim identity by renaming not only one, but almost 36,000 mosques and different madaris in India where he is saying this. And then they're also trying to change the name of many cities from Aligarh, Deoband, Farrukhabad, Sultanpur, Firozabad, Shahjahanpur, many other. And that's like something which they're doing, which is going to break the fabric of this society. And it's their own will, which is very wrong. There's UN Rapporteur for Human Rights who has criticized what India has been doing. There are like many international organizations which has criticized, but despite the fact that there's criticism, India being a bigger economy draws little criticism and takes little action. But having said that, it's 1.4 billion people, and there's a lot of voices coming from within India, which is criticizing what the current regime of BJP, RSS, Bajrang Dal, Shiv Sena, combination of these people who only want to identify India as Hindu India, which is absolutely wrong because it's like a very diverse society. So in terms of Kashmir, that's a separate thing. In terms of other thing, I think the world is witnessing. Maybe it's a little less what they're doing right now, but it's a globalized world. Everybody is seeing what we have just witnessed yesterday of a Muslim being lynched by a mob. We have witnessed that in the past. There is little action. And the worst thing which is happening is their courts are basically also becoming a little more Hindu oriented, which is very wrong. What we have seen in the Babri Masjid case, 35 people were nominated, which was senior leadership of RSS and BJP, L.K. Advani, Manohar Joshi, Uma Bharti, all have been acquitted. That's a wrong thing. You know, there are witnesses, there are video reports that, you know, these people led, and there was a commission which was made back then. And the commission basically gave a very, very clear picture that this was a meticulously planned and mobilization of cadre of RSS. It's not a voluntary thing which has happened. But nonetheless, still things are happening. And I think we just have to wait and see. We can raise our voices on all international forums. We can raise our voices on social media. We can raise voices bilaterally with our Indian counterparts. And by the way, there's a very interesting incident in 2020 or 21. There was a temple which was like sort of desecrated in Karak in Pakistan. All the government took notice, Supreme Court took notice, and there was like order to reconstruct that as well. And that's how you show to the world that, you know, you are preserving the rights of the minority. But what we are seeing on the Indian side, it's very, very unfortunate.
Absolutely. But of course, we really hope that we're able to see some sort of change. And Farooq, you can add to that, but I also would want to ask something with reference to what Mr. Mayu earlier said, that of course there is the UN Security Council resolutions in place and all of that. But at the end of the day, and especially since August 2019, there are unilateral actions taken by India as well. So what good do these resolutions amount to if the current reality is different?
Yeah, you're talking about Kashmir, right?
Yes.
When you talk about Kashmir, Sana, first of all, you have to remember who created, you have to look at the genesis. Who created Kashmir dispute? It was essentially Congress, right? It was their decision to occupy it and force occupation. And then we have seen that this gradual, poisoning of Kashmir, and then Kashmir's toxicity, because the Indian state actually keeps on deploying more and more occupying forces there, deploying them. But that toxicity actually bleeding into the body politic of Indian government, Indian state itself. And now Indian state has become a horrendous, semblance of whatever it was in the past, a caricature, so to speak. But whatever is happening in Kashmir might be salvageable. Because Pakistan can still negotiate and, through international polity or International, Committee of Nations, there can be pressure enough to find a solution to Kashmir, right? Even now, I think that the Kashmiri people don't need my representation to tell you that they are one of the most resilient people on earth, and they have been fighting with this kind of yoke of oppression for not decades but centuries. It happened before as well when Maharaja Ranjit Singh and others were Dogra kings were there. So at this moment, Pakistan can take care of Kashmir through other means. I understand your frustration with UN systems. My concern is that because UN is a body, a collective of all the nations in the world, there is always a problem with the idea of sovereignty or a country's permission to actually talk about what is happening within its jurisdiction or control. But because UN also does great things from climate to other poverty alleviation and others, I don't want to actually just unleash myself against it,
yes.
right? But I think that diplomacy is, in the end, is going to solve Kashmir, and Kashmir is the only lookout that I have got, because when you talk about India in general, I'm done for seeing hope where there is no hope. India is now hopeless. I think every other party, there was only one Trinamool Congress party that had some space. But now, after actually dismantling Congress and dismantling AAP, BJP has turned its guns against TMC, and I don't think that any political force can actually stay in sustain itself against such an onslaught.
Right.
So I don't think that there is any hope.
Right.
I don't know what becomes of India in the coming days. Indians actually get triggered when you talk about India falling apart. They call us Tukde Tukde gang, but regardless of that,
It is what's
India, you are what you choose to be.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Humayun Khan, for being part of the debate. Brigadier General, please stay with us. We'll take a short break and we'll continue with the next segment.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Aybek Arif Usman, and I am Ambassador of Uzbekistan to Islamic Republic of Pakistan. It would be a great privilege and honor to be a part of the diplomatic enclave program and watch me to talk with Omar in the PTV world, inshallah.
Welcome back to the debate. We're now going to be taking a look at our next segment, which is going to take a focus of what is going on in Afghanistan, especially in what has happened earlier today. At least 7 people have been killed in a roadside bomb blast which targeted a petroleum company bus, in which we know that 7 people have lost their lives, 6 others have injured, with many more, of course, also under monitoring. And because of this, of course, we're going to take a look at what is going on within Afghanistan Afghanistan at the moment regarding the kind of terrorist risks that exist, and then of course the way that this is also concerning for people in Pakistan and for Afghanistan soil to be used against any other territory. Brigadier Janjua, of course this incident is tragic and condemnable, but at the end of the day we have seen that such incidents have reoccurred a lot, especially in the past year since the US troop withdrawal, and we've also seen that perhaps the kind of investigation or the kind of control that one can hope for from the Afghan Taliban regime isn't there in terms of dealing with such spikes in terrorist activities. How concerning is that for Pakistan, and what can be done in terms of the kind of international commitments that the Afghan Taliban have earlier made when they're dealing with such threats within, and seem to be not being able to take a complete measure of what their country requires? Brigadier Janjua, are you with me? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I was saying that this incident of roadside bomb blast was not an isolated incident. Such incidents have been happening with metronomic regularity. The real reason is that the Afghan government, led by Taliban, is in complete control of the situation. There are multiple reasons for that. One is the international sanctions. There is infighting within the Afghan Taliban, and there is some clear, visible, and palpable difference now between the Hari version, which is led by which is the leader of Taliban, and the Haqqani factions. So they're not seeing eye to eye on so many issues, and this governance being exploited by ISK and even the National Resistance Front, which is active, which is being aided and aided by forces which are critical to peace in Afghanistan. And because of this security vacuum, so many actors like ISK and elements of NRF are resorting to sporadic acts of violence. This is all a handiwork of those elements which were in the wings to a vacuum, and now perhaps that vacuum is quite visible because of the
Right, absolutely, Janjua Saab, and we want to focus more on that aspect as well, and what to do with regards to that vacuum. But thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the debate. We've now also been joined by Mr. Hassan Khan, who's an Afghan affairs expert. Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan, for joining us. We're of course going to be taking a closer look at what happened in Afghanistan, but in the overall context, especially in what Brigadier Janjua Saab was also mentioning earlier, in the way that the incidents of terrorism have increased, and the fact that currently this is what we're dealing with. This is the Afghan Taliban regime that is currently in power, that is looking after the people of Afghanistan and its soil. This reality that there is no international recognition at the moment, of course, exists, and the fact that we are, of course, neighbors with Afghanistan, and the concerns of this terrorist threat emanating from Afghanistan soil is also very real. Considering all of these factors, which are our reality at the moment, how do we take a look at the kind of threats that continue to emerge, and how do we deal them, keeping in view these realities and not of what we can hope for in the future?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the situation in Afghanistan it seems to be deteriorating. Already it was deteriorated, it's further deteriorating day by day. And the unfortunate part is that the Afghan Taliban, who are currently the rulers of Afghanistan, they are not realizing the significance of world support, and especially the regional country support. Look, a few days back, Pakistan's foreign minister, Bilal Bhutto Zardari, in an interview with an international service, has said that Pakistan want to work with the Afghan interim government to address the issue of terrorism, and especially the TTP. And the Afghan Taliban completely rejected this proposal, saying that the TTP is an internal issue of Pakistan, and Afghanistan, there is no terrorism, or there is no terrorist groups in Afghanistan. So I think this is what we call it. This is a sheer arrogance that instead of realizing that Afghanistan is completely isolated from the international community, when all the reports, whether it is the UN security report or the US reports, and the other reports of the international bodies, they are pointing towards this threat that there are a number of terrorist syndicates active in Afghanistan. I
Right.
think for Pakistan, it's very crucial to come up with a coherent policy how to handle this situation, because the TTP only in the month of November, when the ceasefire was intact, there were 60 terrorist attacks in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and 4 in
Right.
Balochistan. And since
Absolutely.
Taliban, since
Hassan Sahib, we can talk about Pakistan as well, because but because we are right now focusing on Afghanistan, there is another very interesting aspect to this attack that took place. The city of Harathan, which is a part of Balkh province, which is bordering Uzbekistan. It seems that it is a border town where this took place. And this seems to happen exactly when India is also hosting, NSAs from these countries. Astoundingly, there seems to be some kind of motivation to, make Central Asian republics more insecure so that they can cling to India. Do you think that there is some kind of, method to this madness?
I think you can, as for Afghanistan is concerned, I think you cannot rule it out. The reason is multiple countries' interest, especially for the last more than 20 years. Every country was having its proxy in Afghanistan. So it doesn't mean that when Taliban took over, all the proxies ceased to exist from the 15th of August 2021 when Taliban took over. So the countries, they still have their proxies, especially India. Definitely India cannot afford to disengage itself from the Afghan problems, because they have deep interest, for the reason that to sandwich Pakistan and to keep its importance, I think, high in the region. So definitely they have to. So you can't rule it out. But the reason is, I think, at the moment, the elephant in the room is, I think, Taliban itself. Until and unless they realize that they have to engage the regional countries, particularly Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan, and especially Iran. But unfortunately, Taliban do not enjoy good relations with Iran and with the Central Asian countries too, and the same they are doing with Pakistan. So definitely, I think in such a situation, Katabi, countries like India and others, definitely they can they can play their ball well. And you rightly pointed out that to make its importance, especially for the Central Asian republics, because Pakistan is trying to reach out these countries for, especially for business, bilateral trades, and transit trades, etc. So I think for that, India will definitely keep Pakistan's interest in the Central Asian countries. So definitely to divert their attention toward itself, it's a golden opportunity, because Pakistan does not have, I think, at the moment,
Right,
good presence.
absolutely. Hassan Saab, sorry to interrupt, but we're unfortunately out of time. But thank you very much for those views and, of course, the analysis and factors that we need to be mindful of. Thank you for being part of the debate. As always, that's all we have time for. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.